To the Milwaukee Journal, Sentinel Jason Stein. Donald Trump has had a tough time in your state, at least with a lot of the press. He ran into a buzzsaw that I don't think he anticipated. What happened?
Well, you know, Donald Trump was always going to have, in some ways, a difficult road in the state, maybe a little more difficult than other upper Midwest states. But he should have been able to do relatively well here, given our large number of white working-class voters who have worked factory jobs, other jobs that haven't seen their incomes rise adjusted for inflation over the past 10 or 15 years, and may not have even been able to keep their job at all. So he could have done better in this state, but he's just, as your correspondents have mentioned, run into a number of problems here.
You know, I think what happened to it, he didn't have a good staff that alerted him to, or these are risky interviews, or you go into sort of a buzzsaw if you go with these guys. Not that you pre-select interviews like that, but you avoid Lion's Den type environments. That's neither here nor there. There is evidence going into today that Trump was narrowing the gap with Ted Cruz. Are you seeing any evidence of that?
Well, you know, some of the recent polls were a little bit tighter than the Fox poll. But again, some of that is just the natural bouncing around of polls. I mean, I would agree with your sports metaphor, Neil, that, you know, if Ted Cruz loses this one tonight, it would be a lot like the North Carolina fans last night. I mean, really, it would be quite a thing for Donald Trump to pull off at this point. I think he's got some big challenges.
But if he were to lose in the end, Donald Trump loses, but it's close, he is always going to argue, and again, it depends on how those delegates ultimately apportion. I think it's one of those, you know, it's a winner take all, winner take most, and it could be the lion's share of the delegates and then some, maybe all of them going to Ted Cruz. If he avoids a fate like that, he'll say he's in good shape, right?
Well, I mean, I think it's very unlikely that Trump would walk out with no delegates at all. He is relatively strong in the northern and western parts of the state. Okay. So there's a couple congressional districts there that might give him 6 votes. Kasich might win the 2nd district, which is the area around Madison. So, you know, likely to be maybe even all 3 candidates walking out with a few delegates. But I think, you know, Cruz has a chance to take a large number here and make it that much harder for Trump to get the nomination outright.
But you can understand why Cruz is no fan of Kasich still being in the race, because he potentially denies him building that kind of percentage, which would normally give him the delegates at stake in a given congressional district, right?
And we also had this interesting phenomenon where over the last couple of days, Donald Trump has started to complain about Kasich being in the race and say he's taking my votes. And really, the polling doesn't necessarily suggest that that's true. But, you know, it does suggest that maybe in certain parts of the state, like the West or the North, Trump is concerned that he might fail to, you know, get those districts. So, you know, some Republicans in Wisconsin have interpreted that to me as some concern from Trump about his flank.
All right. Well put. Jason, great catching up with you. Jason Stein of the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.